Day to you guys. I hope you're all having a great day. I'm so sorry I'm not here with you today, but here you go. Here's your lesson of the day. So I want you guys to take a minute if you haven't already, and we're looking at lesson 5.5, rhombi and squares, okay? And I'm gonna give you a minute, or actually you're gonna pause this video right here because you need to find these notes. You can find them in Canvas, under modules, of course, okay, under Unit 5, and they are 5.5 in class notes. Okay, so that's where you're gonna find these notes if you haven't done so already, so go ahead and pause and get there, and then come back, okay? All right, so now let's get started. 5.5, rhombi and squares, okay? So a rhombus is a parallelogram, a rhombus is a parallelogram with 4 congruent sides, okay? A rhombus is a parallelogram with 4 congruent sides, okay? So since a rhombus is a parallelogram, it has every quality of a parallelogram plus 2 more, okay? So the 2 more are if a quadrilateral is a rhombus, then its diagonals are perpendicular. And they are perpendicular. Okay, and just a reminder, perpendicular means 90 degrees. Okay. The second one is that if a quadrilateral is a rhombus, then each diagonal bisects a pair of opposite angles. Okay. So again, since rhombus is a parallelogram, all qualities of a parallelogram are true. And then on top of it, its diagonals are perpendicular and each diagonal bisects a pair of opposite angles, okay? All right, we also know that all rhombi are equilateral. All rhombuses or rhombi are equilateral, okay? And what that means is that all of the sides are congruent, okay, like in this picture right here. Okay. Now, I'm going to go back to the fact that a rhombus is a parallelogram. Okay, so since it's a parallelogram, okay, we know that opposite sides are parallel. Okay. We also know that opposite sides are congruent, but in this case, they're all congruent. Okay. We know that the diagonals, draw 2 diagonals here. Because it's a parallelogram, the diagonals bisect each other, okay? They bisect each other. We also know that opposite angles are congruent, okay? So I'm gonna use a highlighter for this. So this angle is congruent to that angle. They are opposite angles, okay? And at the same time, this top right is congruent to bottom left. They are opposite angles. They are congruent, okay? Now, because it's a rhombus, it also tells us that diagonals are perpendicular. So all 4 of these little triangles that are made in this figure right here, in that rhombus, all 4 of those triangles are right triangles, okay? And they're all congruent, okay? All right, so I am telling you for all of these that AB, and this is a mess up, I'm gonna say ABDC is a rhombus, okay? So I've got ABDC is a rhombus, and we need to solve for X, okay? So if you look at this picture, this is pointing to that interior angle, okay? And we just learned that a rhombus's diagonals are perpendicular. Okay, so because they are perpendicular, I know that 2x plus 10 must equal 90 degrees. 2x plus 10 is 90. So to solve for x, we subtract 10 from both sides to get 2x equals 80. Then you're going to divide both sides by 2, and you get that x equals 40. Okay, x equals 40. So again, the important thing here is knowing that the diagonals are perpendicular. It makes 4 right angles in there. Okay. part B. And just a reminder, anytime I'm going too fast in this video, just hit pause, that you have the power here today. Okay, so here we are. We're gonna look at this rhombus, okay? And I notice that here, to solve for x, it's not a right angle, okay? So what I do know, though, is that the diagonal bisects the angle, okay? So that angle is being bisected, meaning that 4x is equal to 5x minus 10, okay? So we're gonna write that, 4x equals 5x minus 10, okay? 4x equals 5x minus 10. Solving for x, I'm going to subtract 5x from both sides to get negative 1x equals negative 10. Then I'm going to divide both sides by negative 1, and I'm going to get that x is positive 10. X is positive 10. Okay. So from those, we learned that the diagonals are perpendicular and that the diagonals bisect the angles. Okay. All right, so let's look at the next example. Again, you're given that ABCD is a rhombus and we need to solve for x. Okay. So if we look at this picture, I notice that this x is not congruent to x plus 14. Okay. But what I am going to focus on, I'm going to focus on the triangle that was made here. Okay, triangle ADE, and we know that since those diagonals are perpendicular, that's a right angle. Okay, we also know that all three of those angles in a triangle add up to 180. Okay, so I'm going to take then angle A, which is x, plus the measure of angle D in this triangle, x plus 14, plus the measure of angle E, which we know is 90, and I'm going to set that equal to 180 to help me solve for x. Okay. I'm going to combine like terms, so x and x is 2x, 14 and 90 is 104. I'm going to solve for x by subtracting 104 from both sides, leaving me with 2x equals 76. Then I'm going to divide both sides by 2, giving me that x is 38. And x is 38. Again, if I'm going too fast anytime, just hit pause and start when you're ready. Okay. All right, so we just talked about what are the characteristics of a rhombus. A rhombus is a parallelogram, but it also has diagonals that are perpendicular and diagonals that bisect opposite angles. Okay, now we're going to talk about the square. Okay, so a square is a parallelogram with 4 congruent sides, okay, and 4 congruent angles. A parallelogram with 4 congruent sides and 4 congruent angles. So if they're all congruent, maybe instead we should say that they are 4 right angles. Okay, there are 4 right angles. They're all the same, 90 degrees. And if you recall, a rectangle also had 4 right angles, okay, but it did not have 4 congruent sides. All right, so that makes a square. Square is a parallelogram. It is also a rectangle because it has those 4 right angles, and it's a rhombus. Okay, a square is a parallelogram, a rectangle, and a rhombus. So the square has the properties of all 3. Okay, that is really, really important. A square has the properties of all 3. The parallelogram, the rectangle, and the rhombus. Okay. All right. So for the last example, the first part is asking, can you conclude that the parallelogram is a rhombus, rectangle, or a square? Okay, so you're given, the important part is that you know it's a parallelogram. Okay, so automatically it's a parallelogram. So is there enough information in part A to tell me if it's a rhombus, rectangle, or a square? Okay, so I'm going to look at part A, and I've noticed there's no way that it's a rectangle or a square because there are no 90-degree angles. Okay, but is it a rhombus? Okay, well, if you go back to your notes, okay, on the first page, it says that a rhombus bisects a pair of opposite angles. Okay, does this rhombus, does this diagonal bisect a pair of opposite angles? Okay, the answer is yes. Okay, so instead of doing a rhombus question mark, we're going to say yes, it's a rhombus for sure. Okay. All right, so now let's look at this next one, part B. Again, we know it's a parallelogram for sure. Okay, now, is it a rhombus? Okay, well, a rhombus says that it has a right angle, that the diagonals are perpendicular, so that definitely makes it a rhombus. Okay, however, I also notice that the diagonals not only bisect each other, but all four of those little guys are congruent to each other. So if you recall from Wednesday's notes, okay, that makes it a rectangle. Okay, so we know it is a parallelogram, we know it is a rhombus, we know it is a rectangle. So the most specific thing that this shape is, that this parallelogram is it's a square. Okay, it is a square because a square has all the properties of a parallelogram, a rhombus, and a rectangle. Okay, so this is a square. Okay. So in closing, we're going to go through all the properties of a rhombus. Okay, a rhombus, if a parallelogram is a rhombus, then the diagonals are perpendicular. The diagonals are perpendicular, and they bisect a pair of opposite angles. Okay, and they bisect a pair of opposite angles. Okay. Next, properties of a rectangle. Okay, a rectangle. If a parallelogram is a rectangle, then all four angles are right angles. Okay, they are right angles, and the diagonals are congruent. Okay. Zoom out. If a parallelogram is a rectangle, then all four angles are right angles, and the diagonals are congruent. And lastly, the properties of a square. Okay. If a parallelogram is a square, all four sides are congruent, and it has four right angles. Okay. All four sides are congruent, and it has four right angles. Okay. So that makes a square. A square is then a parallelogram. It is a rectangle, and it is a rhombus. Okay, and it is a rhombus. There's one last thing that I want to share with you that I know has helped me. Okay, if I visualize this, okay, I've got a parallelogram on top. Okay, and everything beneath that word parallelogram is going to share all of the properties of a parallelogram. So I know that a rectangle is a parallelogram. I also know that a rhombus is a parallelogram. However, a rhombus and a rectangle are not each other. A rectangle is not a rhombus ever, and a rhombus is never a rectangle. Okay? The square holds the properties of all of them. Okay? So because the square is down here, it has the properties of everything above it. Okay, so a square has properties of a rhombus, a parallelogram, and a rectangle. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for the notes. Okay, you are required today, you're going to be taking your Apex quiz. Okay, after you've done this, it's Apex quiz 5.3. Okay, I need you to go slowly because I'm not there to reset it for you. Okay, go slowly. And if you need a reset, you can email me and I will get to it at some point in time this weekend. Okay? So, hope you're having a great day. Have a great weekend.